All right, so I guess we can start now. Still have more attendees getting in. All right, so thank you for joining us today. My name is Rif Itzhaki. I'm the Director of External and Government Relations at Mitvim. Since the Hamas terror attack on October 7 and the ongoing war in Gaza, we at Mitvim, we've been working tirelessly to bring you updated analysis regarding the rapid developments and implications of latest events, alongside of analysis of the function and the role of central, regional, and global actors throughout the war. But also, we have been focusing on promoting policy recommendations for Israel's political echelon and the international community on the desired political outcome for the day after Gaza campaign. So, in the last virtual briefing that we've conducted, we focused on the different perspectives of various actors in the region regarding the outbreak of the war. This time, we would like to take a step forward into the future and to discuss the role of the international community in the day after. So, therefore, the briefing today is based on discussions and publications that we will publish as part of a mutual task force between Mitvim and the Berl Katznelson Foundation, which assembles different experts from various fields to promote a political horizon between Israel and the Palestinians in the day after the Gaza campaign. So today we're going to hear a very interesting presentation that not only analyzing the perspectives of specific actors in the international arena, but also we're going to delve further into concepts and practical terms such as multinational task force and the construction of an economic, political, life-sustaining infrastructure in Gaza. So we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session itself. And of course, at the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A session. So we're going to answer the questions. And let me just remind you that this briefing is also recorded, and we're going to upload the recording afterwards to our social media. So let's start in our first presentation, and I would like to invite and welcome Dr. Omer Zanani, our director of the Israeli-Palestinian Peace-Making Program at Mitvim, and also the director of the Day After Task Force. In his presentation, Omer is going to introduce the roadmap to a political horizon after the Gaza campaign. So, Omer, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Rif, and thank you all. It's very delicate times to talk about the day after. We're now in a days where the IDF forces are inside the Gaza Strip, and we're having thrilling days of returning home of the abductees and the hostages. So it's also I think the best time to discuss the day after, because it might be very soon that the war will end, and we should do something that should have been done in the first day of the war. What is the political goal of the war? Now, before I'll start with the guiding principles, I want to talk about three premises that led us, the rationale that led us to the roadmap that I will try to portray to you. The first one is that victory over Hamas cannot be solely by force, by military force. The military force is very important. The military achievement in Gaza Strip is very important and crucial, but it's not the only path to win Hamas and the Muqawama, the resistance of the Palestinians. In order to do that, we have to put a political horizon, strong political horizon, that will strengthen the moderates, not only in the Palestinian-Israeli arena, but also in the Middle East as a whole, and weakens the radicals. This is the first. The second one, we should have a transition period, mainly because the Palestinian Authority nowadays is inability and unwilling to receive on the guns of the IDF the Gaza Strip. So there has to be a transition period. And the third one, maybe the most important one, we have to have a new and different government in Israel, because the current government, and Netanyahu, the prime minister, talked about it just 2 days ago. His vision is a vision of a continuance of the war, of annexation, of transfer, and of ruining the democracy in Israel. So we have to have a new government in order to go progress with this plan. Now, after having these premises, we have here the guiding principle. As I said, first, strong political horizon from the start. This is also a very important lesson learned from the failed Oslo process. And we'll talk about what is a strong political horizon. We know that there has to be a strong international and regional involvement. We're not talking only about a solution to Gaza Strip. We're talking about a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also to the regional conflict and to the Iran issue and to other issues as terror and even the climate crisis. Therefore, we have to have a strong international and regional involvement. And maybe the most important principle, and we're talking about it for 2 years now, is what we call the evolving peace. We shouldn't only sit by the table and talk about a solution that might never come. We should have gradual promotion of a two-state reality, because what happens today on the ground is a one-state reality, and we should change the ship as a whole. And it's not only Israelis and Palestinians, mainly Israelis, but it's steps that should be taken by the international community, mainly by the USA. I'll talk about it later. The time frame, to my eyes, is 3 to 5 years. I hope it would be earlier, but I think this is very realistic. And as I mentioned, it has to be led by the US with a US veto, so we won't go back to the roadmap that Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister of Israel, liked very much, because there was an Israeli veto not to go to the next and to the next stage. Thank you. Reef, can you show the map, please? So there it is. Again, you have the time frame. We're talking about an opening stage, an interim phase, and the third phase, which is negotiations. The opening phase should be based on an international decision. I'm not sure if the UNSC is able nowadays with Russia and China to make with one voice, with the veto in the UNSC, that we might have a new decision. And if not, it might come by a speech by President Biden or something like that. But there has to be an international move. Our CEO, Gil Murciano, wrote a brilliant paper about the Be'eri Summit, which I think shows best the returning home. It's not Camp David, it's not Annapolis. It should be here in Kibbutz Be'eri, maybe the kibbutz that was hit more than others. And the summit shows going to the place and looking at the region. There has to be also an international new forum, in a way, a new quartet that also addresses the change in the global order. Russia will not be there, but there will be there the Europeans, the US, of course, and maybe Arab countries, mainly Saudi Arabia. And at this stage, we'll have commitments, again, learning from the wrongs of Oslo. Israel should acknowledge a Palestinian state as a vision and the two-state solution. The Palestinians should acknowledge Israel as sovereign and as a home for the Jewish in the world. And also the commitment to abandon the terrorism and incitement, and also have commitments from the US and KSA, the Saudis, about looking differently at the future of the region. Now, the interim phase, I won't talk about the two BRICS, the multinational force for Gaza. Nir Arieli will will drill into it, and the state rehabilitation. Itzhak Gal will talk about it. But the main issue, and this is very important, we're talking about creating a reality of a two-state solution, meaning the two-state reality. This means that the reconstruction itself and everything that is being done is looking forward at a new direction. So it's not solely taking care of Gaza or taking care of the West Bank. Now, I use the term that President Biden, I like it very much, the revitalized Palestinian Authority, because it means that it's not only doing reforms, it's something completely different. And we're talking here about three circles. We're talking about a new leadership, we're talking about new and democratic institutions, and we're talking about a new security apparatus. And this is something that we have to put our minds in. And there are many ideas here. And I think 2 or 3 years can make a change. Now, the next one is very important from the international community and mainly from the US, because I think this is, in a way, putting a mirror image in front of the paradigm of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu. It's a recognition of the Palestinian state by the US, which means the vision, the future of annexation of the West Bank and of Gaza Strip is out of the question. The Israelis in this, and we have many papers about it, about the CBMs that should take place, for example, in sea area, and for example, the economic approach. You know, there is the Paris Protocol that we have to think about again. It won't be changed in a way that should be changed after the final agreement, but there are many things to do here that will bring about a new economic situation for the Palestinian Authority. And there are many other steps. I just don't have the time. And maybe in the questions and answers, I will elaborate more about it. The Palestinians, of course, will prove that they act effectively against terrorism, against incitement. And at the end of this stage, and this is a very important stage, there will be Palestinian elections. To my eyes, it's very important. And I think we have to learn the lesson of 2006. And the condition will be that those who are nominees for being president and in the government of the Palestinians will stand by the criterion of the 3 terms that we know: acknowledging Israel's right to exist, abandoning the terrorism, and acknowledging the agreements with Israel. After that, there will be a political agreement, which will be built by an updated Arab initiative, because it was, I remind you, it's from 2002, and there is a place to revise it. But the outcome will be a viable Palestinian state. This is very important. Of course, Palestinian state which is demilitarized, and then not only the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also the end of the Israeli-Arab conflict. And alongside, there is a defensive regional coalition. There are 2 goals for the whole roadmap. I didn't say that. The first is a political agreement, and the second, because we're dealing with many complex threats, such as Iran and regional terrorism, there should be, under the US umbrella, a defensive regional coalition. So it's very complicated as a picture, but I think it's the best time from here to go to the other experts that will talk mainly about the BRICS that you can see here, the multinational force, the state rehabilitation, etc. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Omer, for the clear presentation and also the illustration of the different phases and stages. I guess right now, the most important phase right now, I would say that it's like showing commitment and dedication to the process from all sides. But of course, right now we're struggling with our inner struggles, and challenges. But yeah, anyway. So I would like to invite the next guest, Nadav Tamir, the Executive Director of JSPID Israel and a Policy Fellow at Mitvim, who is going to share the American perspective regarding the day after. And I also would like to thank Nadav for joining us at the last minute, since we had some unexpected changes revolving around the speakers. But thank you again, Nadav, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Reef, and thank you, Omer. And Omer touched on the American role, and I would like to say that not only that the American role is indeed essential, but actually what Omer said is pretty much how Biden sees, the process. But I think, Omer, forgive me for saying it, he has a little more leverage, and I will explain why. So what the Biden administration did from the outset of this tragedy on October 7th is to support Israel in unprecedented way, both emotionally. He actually became the father figure that Israelis did not get from their government, but they did get it from Biden in his speeches, in his embrace, in his emotional involvement in everything that is going on, but also, of course, sending 2 aircraft carriers and a nuclear submarine and marine forces, and making sure that this is not just a verbal embrace, but also very material. And there's also a lot of support in terms of military components and intelligence, and of course deterring other players from getting into this to make it a larger issue than just Israel and Hamas. And because he did it, and he did it, I always say that countries, when they craft foreign policy, it's a combination of values, interest, and politics. And I think that Biden actually felt that all those components gives him a good reason to do what he did. Because the values, he said it by himself that he always felt a Zionist, and he felt that this attack was outrageous. But also in terms of interest, I think Biden understands that what happened between Israel and Hamas is in some ways continuation of what happened in Ukraine, and also the relations between Russia and Iran, and the role that Iran plays, both with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with the Houthis. He felt that this is a continuation of his bold leadership on the Ukrainian issue, and that he has to show American resolve, which are, the interest part. On the political front, I think Biden understands that we are in election year. He can't really do anything domestically because he lost the majority of the House of Representatives in the midterms elections. The only place where he could really show leadership is foreign affairs. And as much as he was successful in keeping NATO together and getting Ukraine to be pretty successful, more than the expectations in facing Russia, I think he understands that this is also his way to get a legacy as a leader in this case. Now it's a risk, and we will get to his political problems. It's a risk because there are a lot of unknowns in a war, and there's also challenges that we'll get into. But because he made such an important intervention, he had the leverage to also influence and put limits to the Israeli response. I would say boldly that without the Biden response, or without Biden's control of the way Israel responded, we would have been in a situation where most of the hostages would have been dead already, and Israel would be deep in the mud of Gaza. But he kept on saying to the Israelis, there are certain limits. International law, not just because of the moral issue, but because he needs legitimacy from the Europeans, from other players, and also from the domestic scene in the US. So that Israel acts according to the international law is very important for that. Humanitarian help to civilian Gazans and making as much separation between civilian Gazans and Hamas, which was not exactly the instinct of the Israeli government in the early days, where it was mostly revenge and an attempt to show that we overcame the big failure of October 7th. And the last thing, which also leads to the day after, is to insist that Israel will have an exit strategy and that the military campaign will be part of a larger strategy. And this is the toughest part, where he cannot still get any response from the Israeli government about what's next, because of the political components of this government. And that makes it very hard for Biden to also explain what he's doing to his allies and to the political scene in the US. But for Biden, and he keeps on insisting it, he's trying to make sure that this conflict between Israel and Hamas does not spill over to other places. You know, that the Hezbollah component is limited, and that there is a deterrence, an American deterrence, and also an attempt to control what's happening with the Houthis and other elements that might get involved. But also, he keeps on talking about the day after. And the day after, as Omer said, was both a revitalized Palestinian Authority and a two-state solution. Two elements that the government of Israel cannot say yes to, but Biden keeps on insisting on it. And the leverage that he was able to gather is critical to move things in the direction that Omer mentioned. Now, of course, reality will also play a role, because the goals that the Israeli government set for this operation are not realistic. As Omer said, there is no only military way to defeat Hamas. The defeat of Hamas has to be also political, and it has to be empowering the Palestinian moderates, the two-staters, Fatah, and it has to involve other regional players that will not get involved if they don't know that it leads to a political horizon and stability. So this is the big challenge for Biden. And I'm sure that some of his advisors are telling him, listen, you're getting hurt, you're losing the left side of the Democratic Party, you're losing the young progressives that are showing in the polls that are unhappy. But other advisors are telling him, listen, it's like swimming in a lake. If you're in the middle of the lake, it doesn't make sense to swim backwards. Swim forward, it's because you're already in it. And the only way to win it is to stay on it. And that is the biggest leverage for all of us who want a two-state solution. Because without the American leadership, the regional architecture, the international architecture, the fact that we have an international consensus on a two-state solution with the exception of Iran, Hamas, and Israel, is something that Biden could play on. It might be the only thing that US, Russia, and China could agree on, a two-state solution. And this is an opportunity that has to be led, and I have to say that, of course, it can only be implemented not only after Hamas, but also after Abbas and also after Netanyahu. Because, as I said, the Netanyahu government cannot accept this vision, but I don't think it is a sustainable government anyhow, and we see it in the polls. Abbas became illegitimate by his own people. and the Palestinians desperately need elections. But my only concern is that the only way that the good guys will win in elections, both in Israel and in Palestine, is with a political horizon. And that's why the political horizon has to be declared first. And that will also affect the politics in Israel and Palestine, and will create a regional alliance that will be able to take over Gaza for the phase that Omer mentioned, and also to lead it to a two-state solution. The American role here is critical, and we're talking about election years, while the Republicans don't want to give Biden any present. For example, the way they don't approve the fact that he's trying to put the support for Israel with Ukraine and with Gaza. And there are progressives who are saying that his unconditional support of Israel is too much. And he will have to play in this, and we have to help him succeed in order to help us. And I'll end here.
Thank you, Nadav. Despite the political situation in Israel and the PA, I believe, no doubt that the US will be an active and dedicated actor in the region in terms of the day after. So also set the tone regarding the future of this region. But let's see who will be the allies. And now we're going to speak about one of the allies. I would like to invite Dr. Maya Sion-Tzidkiyahu, our Director of Israel Europe Program at Mitvim, and she's going to share with us the European perspective on the day after and how it merges with the vision of the US. So please, Maya, the stage is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. So Omer spoke about the international involvement in the solution of the conflict, and Nadav about the United States, which is obviously the major international player. And I want to emphasize the international coalition together with the European Union and also Arab countries. And then the EU aspires to be a real player in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict since the Oslo process, but it was always relegated or downplayed to being mainly a payer, and mainly because Israel and the United States didn't let the European Union be a player, and due to weak capabilities, be it institutional ones or in terms of lack of hard power or hard credible power, and hard power is very much needed in the Middle East and in solving solutions, the conflicts here. And now the EU and the member states together are indeed a payer. They are the major donor to the Palestinians. Most of the funds go to projects. Some go directly to the Palestinian Authority. But I have to stress that unlike some organizations are claiming in Israel, none goes to terror organizations, not to Hamas, not to any other terror organizations, and mostly goes, as I said, to projects and not to the Palestinian Authority even directly. I think that nowadays there is some chance that the EU may indeed become more of a player and not just mere payer. If indeed the road to Israeli-Palestinian solution will be opened, and especially as long as the United States president keeps on this good transatlantic cooperation that we have seen in the past years. There is good cooperation and also burden sharing when we look at Ukraine, for example, and it could repeat itself also in the Middle East. So I want to emphasize this positive and synergy in this transatlantic cooperation, and to stress the common conditions that the EU heads and also the heads of the United States, Biden and Blinken, have stressed. And the EU put some emphasis on involving the Arab countries in this solution. So as was mentioned here before, the Middle East conflict is a piece in the puzzle of the fight on global world order. The United States and Europe clearly sees Russia-Iran axis and Iran's militias in the region, and Israel is part of the West of the free world, and therefore we are part of this puzzle in maintaining world liberal order. If we get things straight here in the region, that could enhance also solving the other parts of the puzzle. A coalition composed by the United States, the European Union, and Arab countries can put pressure on both Israel and the Palestinians towards what I call two-state solution plus. And the plus, as we've also heard, is the normalization with Arab countries, mainly Saudi Arabia. But also, the European Union has presented and offered to Israel and to the Palestinians already in 2013 what it's called a special privileged partnership. The two sides never really inspected what the special privilege partnership would entail, but this is still something on the table that the EU can bring to the front. And in September, President Biden was speaking about the India Middle East corridor, and that corridor could lead to more integration and to economic prosperity in the region. And so the stakes are high on many aspects. So I'd like to present to you the coordinated message of the basic principles for the day after the war. And I'll begin to show you how coordinated this message was. I'll just go over the dates and who presented those conditions. They were repeated for at least 4 times. First, they were presented on the 4th of November by the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. She spoke about them in Brussels. And then 4 days later, Secretary of State Blinken was presenting them at the G7 summit in Tokyo. That was on November 8th. A few days later, the High Representative for Common Foreign and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, presented them also in Brussels. And he stressed, he not just repeated them, he elaborated them a little bit and put some emphasis on the role of Arab countries, especially the political role, and not just the giving funds to the rehabilitation of Gaza. And then last, but obviously and certainly not least, President Biden published on the Washington Post on 18th of November those same conditions. And so they were repeatedly said and stated by the heads of the European Union and the heads of the Biden himself and Blinken. So if we can go to the next slide, Rif, we can see those basic principles. And just for the matter of, so it will be easier to go and follow them, they are divided. They were divided by Borrell to 3 no's and 3 yeses. We'll see 4 in each because they're a bit more complicated than just 3 and 3. And so the first 3 are, those 3 no's are that Gaza cannot remain under the control of Hamas or any other terror organization. The US and the EU are unwilling to accept in that respect. They were, willing to accept the election of Hamas in 2006, but we all see where it led us, and therefore what Omer was discussing beforehand, that there should be some conditions that to abandon the use of terror is, I think, should be one of the conditions, but those were not clearly stated here. On the other hand, the other 2 were that the Gaza cannot be occupied by Israel again. So all of those huge players on the international scene were stating that very clearly to Netanyahu. And then the third one was that Gaza cannot be divided. Its territory cannot be decreased, reduced. So any fantasies about resettlements of Israeli villages around Gaza is again, an illusion by stated by the international community. The fourth one was stated and was not so much repeated later on, but no forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. That would maintain the stability, the regional stability of Egypt, also of Jordan, and would, there is also already enough tragedy, and there's a wish to avoid another big tragedy to the Palestinians. So let's go to the yes part. What will be the 3 yeses? And that's a bit tricky part of the equation or those conditions. Omer spoke already about the Palestinian Authority that must return to Gaza, and the stress here about a Palestinian Authority. It's not the Palestinian Authority. It's a revitalized one, a new one. I think Omer described very well what it entails. The second one is what Borrell has added to what Ursula von der Leyen, Blinken, and Biden were saying, and that is the political involvement of Arab states, that they should commit themselves to engage in building the Palestinian state, perhaps also in the international multilateral force that Nir will speak about in a minute. And the third one is Borrell was stating that the EU, Europeans must be an active player in the solution. He has said that for 30 years the EU have been speaking about that, but has not really acted upon it. So that was another condition. And the last one, Omer also mentioned it, is that the future Palestinian state will entail the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. We'll see about the areas of East Jerusalem, but it has to be a viable economic state, and therefore there should be no siege, no economic siege on Gaza Strip, and the economy is a vital part of that solution. So what I wanted to show is first those 6 conditions, but also how tight the transatlantic US-EU coordination is on those principles. And I think this is a really good way forward, especially when you look at the European Union and you see there Ursula von der Leyen, who is considered to be a very pro-Israeli person, and Joseph Borrell, who is considered to be much more pro-Palestinian. And among those 2 personalities, you would probably find most of the EU member states, and their positions would be somewhere in between on this line. So I think that if the EU would bring and try to bring all the member states, that would be very much enhancement of this international coalition, and could also enroll the Arab countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maya. I believe there will be a strong coordination between the EU and the US regarding the targets and aims the day after the list of yes and no. But right now we have much more questions regarding the practical terms, I would say, and the concept themselves. For example, how we are going to revitalize the PA, what does it mean, how long is it going to take place, and don't forget that there are also sentiments of the Israeli public regarding the return of the PA, for example, which are not very significant at all. Based on the survey that we did recently, only 31% of the public believe that the PA is essential for Israeli security. So now we're going to understand the practical terms behind the day after. So I would like to invite Dr. Nir Arieli. He is an associate professor of international history at the University of Leeds and a member of the task force. He's going to elaborate on the concept of establishing a multinational task force in Gaza. But first of all, let me just
Thank you, Reef, and good evening to everyone. As you all know by now, the Israeli government hasn't set out any long-term strategy for what should happen in Gaza when the war is over. The Biden administration and the EU leadership, as we've just heard, as well as others, have said that they want to see a reformed or revitalized Palestinian Authority take over Gaza. However, President Abbas and other Palestinian officials have made it clear that they don't want to come into Gaza on the back of Israeli tanks. Furthermore, and this is important, the security organizations of the PA currently don't have the capacity to assume responsibility and maintain control over the Gaza Strip. Now, assuming we don't want to see a permanent or even a long-term Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, but at the same time, we want to avoid Hamas maintaining its control over this area, some interim solution is needed. In a paper that I co-authored with Jacob Stoyle and Mary Elizabeth Walters, we argue that a multinational peacekeeping force could be deployed, and as a transitional phase between an Israeli withdrawal and the PA assuming responsibility for Gaza. Drawing on a number of historical cases, we argue that such a force will need to be militarily robust and have a clear mandate and rules of engagement. Now, ideally, its mandate should be based on a UN Security Council resolution and also on Chapter 7 in the UN Charter. The mission of this force should include 3 tasks. First of all, security. We don't know yet to what extent Hamas will be defeated in this war, and we cannot discount the possibility that the multinational force will have to disarm militants and engage in peace enforcement. If the force won't be able to provide security, its mission will fail. And if you want, in the Q&A, we can talk about how previous missions have indeed failed. A second task that it will need to fulfill is governance. There mustn't be a governance vacuum in Gaza. Basic services will have to come back online as soon as possible. And we suggest that a high representative should be appointed and take charge of the civilian side of the mission. And finally, the third task is going to revolve around reconstruction. Now, as Yitzhak Gal will tell you in a few minutes, we are talking about reconstruction on a massive scale. It's going to be a massive effort. Most of the reconstruction will have to be shouldered by foreign governments and NGOs, but the multinational force could play a role in initial efforts using military engineers, for instance, dealing with unexploded ordnance and so on. And importantly, making sure that aid isn't used by Hamas, isn't taken over by Hamas and used for its own purposes. My last comment is that the multinational force requires international cooperation and consent. And this very much links to what Omer and Nadav and Maya have said. Israel will have to agree to hand over territory in Gaza to this multinational force, and it could perhaps do it in a phased manner, handing over bits of Gaza as the situation improves. And of course, the Palestinian Authority would need to work with this with a multinational force and to gradually assume responsibility over Gaza from it. So if we go back to Omer's initial idea of this happening over 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, gradually the Palestinian Authority would assume responsibility from the multinational force. Without the Palestinian Authority being part of the process, without this long-term vision that everyone has mentioned so far, we very much doubt that the international community would agree to become involved. So the PA's adherence and participation is absolutely vital. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nir. So regarding, it seems that also Israeli public is sort of in favor of deploying multinational task force to Gaza, but mostly based on Western countries rather than Arab countries. In the survey that we did recently, in the midst of the war, our survey shows that 37% of the public supports the concept of a Western task force, while 18% in favor of a combination between like Western countries and moderated Arab countries. But yeah, so next up we have welcome Yitzhak Gal, is an economic and business consultant for the Middle East, a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East, Eastern and African Studies and Mitvim, and also a member of our task force. So Yitzhak is going to discuss the construction of an economic, political infrastructure in Gaza. So welcome, Yitzhak, and you can start now.
Thank you, Rif. The start and the end of any economic plan for Gaza is a political envelope or political infrastructure for this. Without a proper political envelope, there is no use and no feasibility for any reconstruction or economic development plan. So a precondition for starting any sustainable reconstruction and development process is first, Gaza without Hamas, and second, or interrelated to this, a kind of an interim political arrangement or political structure that will take over Gaza for temporarily, probably, from Hamas and from the Israeli army, and now I'll go to the economic aspects of a possible reconstruction and economic plan for Gaza, but again, I emphasize the political precondition, and I will relate to this. This will be also my final remark when at the end of my part. Okay. In order to have a sustainable in order to put Gaza on a sustainable economic development path, reconstruction is not enough. In fact, Gaza was reconstructed several times, and without a proper economic development solution, we may see Gaza reconstructed again and again for many decades. So an appropriate or successful economic development plan must be a two-phase plan. The first phase is immediate support and reconstruction. And given the magnitude of destruction that Gaza is experiencing now, my estimate of the cost of reconstruction and immediate support is at the magnitude of probably around $25 billion. This is a huge amount. It is more than 5 times or even 6 times the amount that was budgeted for the last reconstruction round, which was in 2014. Given this magnitude of destruction, this phase of reconstruction will not be short. It probably will take something between 3 to 5 years just to reconstruct what has been damaged and what is still being destroyed in this war. And given this relatively long period that will be required for reconstruction, the reconstruction will need to be designed to work in parallel with the economic development plan. So the way to work in Gaza will be to start with the immediate relief program, which has already started, as you know. Have a reconstruction program, but in parallel, maybe after 6 months or 12 months of the reconstruction, of starting the reconstruction, the second phase needs to take place, and the second phase is composed of several elements which are indicated in the second page. If you can go to it, Rif, thank you. Now, this economic development plan, or a kind of economic leap plan, because Gaza has a potential a potential for very fast and sustainable growth once a stable political ecosystem is put in place. So in fact the economic development plan, which we put some guidelines to it in a more detailed document, is composed of the following main elements. First, a set of game-changing projects, infrastructure projects, industrial estates, and some other projects that will, in fact, provide Gaza first with economic infrastructure that would enable it that will be a basis for fast economic growth. Second, connectivity to the West Bank, Israel, and through the West Bank to the eastern part of the Arab world, most importantly to the Gulf. And this new infrastructure will be the basis for the economic leap, or for tapping the huge economic potential of Gaza. This is the first element. The second element is sustaining the economic relations with the two most important trading and economic partners of Gaza, which is first the West Bank and second Israel. These are the natural and largest and most important economic partners and trading partners of Gaza, and there is no feasibility for a sustainable economic development of Gaza without strong and close relations with these two territories, Israel and the West Bank. The next point, which is very important, but it will take some time to develop, is developing economic relations with the Gulf countries. The potential of these economic relations is huge, and in time, these countries may be a very important economic partner of Gaza, equal in importance to Israel. The last 2 points are the integration of the economic development plan for Gaza with a wider economic development plan of the Palestinian Authority. This is also very important. And the last one is even wider integration of Gaza with very important economic developments and economic regional economic projects which are already taking place in the region, mainly in the Gulf, and from the Gulf also to or with the lead of the Gulf also to other countries. And the result of all this development will be, of course, a huge increase in investment in the economy of Gaza, which is a kind of which of course will close the circle. And at the end, I just want to repeat my opening remark. All this will not be feasible without an appropriate and strong non-Hamas political arrangement and a capable government that will rule Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Yitzhak. Thank you, Yitzhak. It is clear that the economic measures have an impact on the political measures and vice versa, and therefore the coordination between them should be close and meaningful. Finally, I would like to invite our project manager of climate diplomacy at Mitvim, Bar Rappaport, who will speak about the humanitarian aid and the life-sustaining infrastructure in Gaza. So please.
Thank you, Yuri. Can you hear me well? Okay, so first, I will say that a basic understanding that I think we must support in is to ensure that fundamental humanitarian condition and the functioning of life-sustaining infrastructure in the Gaza Strip is an Israeli interest and is a central component in Israel national security. Because we live in the same geographic area, because infections and disease that impact the Gaza population will impact the Israeli kidnapped and the soldiers and the entire population in Israel, because we must avoid from reaching catastrophe and damage that are irreversible. And moreover, because the Israel moral identity and its inner legitimacy and international legitimacy to fight against Hamas is related in the fact that Israel allows and supports humanitarian aid. And I'm saying it to you because there is a public argument about those issues. For example, whether Israel should allow fuel for water infrastructure to enter Gaza. Currently, it happens because the professional and the security officials supports it, but it's not granted, and it's under political argument. And international support is important. It's critical in designing this public narrative around those issues to make it an axioma. Now, Rif, can you pass the... I'll say that the humanitarian issues are very wide. I will focus currently very shortly in 4 issues: access to clean water, treatment in sewage water, availability of energy for those needs, and how it affects public health. And we'll give some main recommendations around those subjects. If you can pass one more, Rif, please. Thank you. So first is to support what's already happening. There are activities that are already taking place, entering fuels for crucial infrastructures, keeping water supply flow from Israel. But there are more activities that needs to take place. Disinfection of all water sources by chlorine, because there is sewage in the street and it can severely affect public health. And there is a lot of crucial equipment that is required to support and fix some of the infrastructures in those days. Another matter that is important in the present and has impact on the future is how we build institutional infrastructure that bypass Hamas, working with the professional staffs at the Water Authority, for example, that are under the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority, not under Hamas. How do we use international mediators for those professional actions that we need to do, because in lots of the Palestinians won't work directly in front of Israel. So those mechanisms that we build now in order to sustain infrastructures and humanitarian aid can have the potential to build future institutions that are positive. And I will say that we must examine more possibilities in the context of an option to enter off-grid renewable system that supply energy for crucial facilities, see how we can use technology to monitor electricity transmission, for example, to see how we can open the option to transfer electricity to the south of Gaza and not enter fuel. There's much more to say. I will stop here, but I will say that I will be very happy to discuss in details on this subject with anyone that is interesting. So thank you.
Thank you, Bar. And now I guess we have like 25 minutes, something like this, for questions. So I have some questions over here. So we'll start with the first one. Based on Omer's outline, I can envisage moderates and pragmatists on both sides buying in. On another hand, I can envisage extremists on both sides fighting against any kind of or such an agreement. How can moderates take over the agenda from the extremists? We're talking about the agenda for the day after. So Omer.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I have to admit I don't have a 100% full answer for it. But as I mentioned, let's say there are two elements that will help us on this route of the 3 to 5 years dealing with what we call the spoilers. First of all, who are the spoilers? It's Iran, it's regional spoilers, and it's inner spoilers from the Palestinian arena and from Israel, who will try to ruin any idea of building a Palestinian state, and it is a big question. Now here I think I can talk about two elements that are crucial here. The first, as Nadav mentioned, the US importance, the US role in the area, not only the involvement, but also the presence of the US. And we saw that the presence of the United States with carriers, with submarine, with generals are succeeding in the deterrent, in deterring those spoilers, especially Iran and other actors. But this is only the first one. I think the most important idea is what I've mentioned, is that we're not waiting, and we shouldn't wait. The biggest mistake of the past experience, when we talk around the table and nothing is happening on the ground. You remember we called it nothing is agreed upon until everything is agreed. This was the equation of the Israelis and the Palestinian. It was a big mistake. We have to run to a reality of a two-states solution. And I think when the publics, the Israeli and the Palestinian public, sees a real progress, this might change the equation between the radicals and the moderates.
Okay. I would like to move to the next question here, but we don't have right now Nadav Tamir, but maybe some of you can answer this. The sensitive question for Biden and for the speakers who support him: why does he remain silent on Iran and the Iranian deal? Maya, maybe you can answer it, or Omer.
I think I would rather leave it to maybe Omer, you'd like to take it again, or Neil.
No, well, I think it's not something that anyone deals with. You know, the media also stopped talking about the Ukrainian and the Russian war. I don't think, if you mean the nuclear issue, I don't think there's a place for it and attention for it from all the actors. But I don't think there's a change in his approach towards the issue. That's my opinion.
Okay. So we will move on to the next question here. If the Gaza is connected to the West Bank, Israel, it would cut off the western part of Israel to south part of Israel. It thus seems like Israel will need to maintain possession of the eastern part of the West Bank so as to keep the south and the north parts of Israel contiguous. How are these efforts being perceived as an approach?
Well, it's a very short answer. I think the least of our problems is the issue of the what we call the safe passage. By the way, I wrote about it in the two books that I wrote about the Annapolis process and about other processes. Israel will not be cut. The Palestinians agreed with Israel to a safe passage, which will be based on either bridge or bridges, either tunnel or tunnels. It will not cut the connectivity, the contiguity of Israel. So there's no connection between what happens on the eastern side and on the western side. And if the question is dealing with the Jordan Valley issue, it's a totally different issue. When we look at the map, this issue should be dealt differently I think, under the approach of Ehud Olmert and Abu Mazen discussions. Late on the discussion, when they thought about putting force on the eastern side of the Jordan Valley and not on the western side of the Jordan Valley. And that's exactly why we need the assistance of countries like Jordan, like Egypt, and like Saudi Arabia, not only to support us in the way ahead, but also to solve core issues between Israel and Palestine.
All right. See a very interesting question here. How do you ensure that Hamas or a new party under a new name but with the same objectives will not participate in the Palestinian elections? Maybe
it is.
Yes.
Well, it's mine. I see. It is a very good question also. But I think here we can put it as a main condition. There will be, and by the way, it happens in Israel. Although it's very hard to say it when we know ministers like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, but basically we have a judicial system that rules who will be elected and who will not participate in the elections. And here the point is very clear. There will be no elections when people like activists in Hamas or in other terrorist organization that does not belong to those who agree with the existence of Israel, acknowledge the agreements with it, as we know the three conditions of the quartet in the past, and does not acknowledge the agreements with it, they will not participate. Now, I know that the PA has to agree to it, but there will be a negotiation about it. but I think it's their interest that the people that will present and will rule the Palestinian arena will be mainly those who act according to those three conditions.
Yes. We will move on to another question here. Would it make sense for Israel to try to evacuate as many Gaza civilians that are vetted as not hostile Hamas connected to a safe area out of the area in the siege? This would be better enable Israel to focus against hostile Hamas elements while reducing civilians' casualties. This might also make war against Hamas easier.
This is a operational question, actually a tactical question, a very important one, but a very militarily question. I think the IDF thinks about ways to do the war against Hamas more effective. The problem of Gaza Strip is that it's very, very small. And the only place that I can think of where we can evacuate Gazans is inside Israel, because the Egyptian president Assisi already spoke about what will be the scenario after the Gazans will enter in masses inside Sinai, and there will be practically a scenario like that that will lead to the end of the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. And this is a very basic security interest, national interest of Israel. And I can't think of another place. Well, maybe in the sea, but I can't think of another place where we can evacuate those masses. We're talking about between 1 and 1.5 million Palestinians. It is a big problem.
Yes, indeed. I think I have a question for Nir here. What does an effective international security arrangement in Gaza look like? UN peacekeepers on the blue line haven't been specifically effective keeping the peace, and it seems doubtful that Israel would trust a similar arrangement to maintain its security in Gaza.
Thank you. So yes, we can think of many cases where peacekeepers weren't able to fulfill their mission. Most prominent on the minds of many Israelis is the UNIFIL mission in Lebanon, which by and large has not succeeded in its mission of keeping Hezbollah away from Israel's border as envisaged by UN Resolution 1701. So we would need a much more robust force, a much larger force. The composition of the force, if such a force ever happens, will be a very delicate issue, but it must include contingents from countries with the proper military capabilities, without which the force won't be able to fulfill its task. And also we should think about different size of a force. So if we look at more successful peacekeeping forces historically in places like Kosovo or in Bosnia after 95, or in East Timor, we're talking about very large forces. So 60,000 troops in Bosnia, 50,000 troops in Kosovo. We would need something of that magnitude in order for the force to be effective. And just to reiterate the points I made earlier about the mandate and the rules of engagement, without which a force that's only allowed to fire when fired upon may struggle to be effective in Gaza.
Right. I think we will continue with Nir because there is another question regarding, I guess, peacekeeping. So two questions here I have. Would European and Arab countries, some of those, be prepared to participate in the peacekeeping force under UN, like in Lebanon? The Israeli government seems intent on continuing war after the truce, which would jeopardize dramatically the issue of humanitarian aid. is there a different scenario possible under the present government?
I'm happy to answer the first question. The second one, I'm not sure. Could you repeat it, please? Just the first one?
The first one?
Yeah.
Wait, it was dismissed somehow. Sorry. Wait, we just lost it.
It's in the answered questions.
Answered questions. Thank you, Frankie. Okay. Okay, so the first question, would European and Arab countries, some of those, be prepared to participate in the peacekeeping force under UN, like in Lebanon? This is the first.
Okay. So the short answer is I don't know, because I don't speak for any of those governments, but ideally I would like to hope so. So I think in order for both the Israelis and the Palestinians to be satisfied, I think a mixture of European and Arab country forces would be ideal. That would reassure both sides, Israel on the security side, and the Palestinians also, that that this is a force they can live with. It's, as we said, very, very important to have the Palestinian Authority accept and even invite the multinational force. If the Palestinian Authority, if there is no Palestinian involvement whatsoever in the process, then there is nothing preventing the Gazans from seeing this force as just another foreign occupier. So it's imperative that we do have Palestinian engagement and involvement in the process.
With your permission, Rif, I want to add something,
Sure.
which is I think very important, because I like Nir. I think also that the best approach would be to bring a multinational force. But the question is correct, and I met with Europeans, and I read about what the Arabs are saying as an answer to the US. There is a possibility, there is a scenario that they won't come. They won't take their boots and put it on the grounds of the Gaza Strip. And we have to prepare ourselves to a scenario that we have this roadmap without a multinational force. Even if Israel wants it, there are trends and there are voices that we hear that might put this scenario in a very not a very safe place. So I think we don't have to build solely on this issue. This is not a basic assumption for the roadmap, in my eyes.
All right. We will continue with this question by Barbara Landau. Citizens in Israel, West Bank, and Gaza have been fed very different media reports that added considerably to distrust and opposing beliefs about the intentions and ability to secure work together. What will be needed to shift the attitudes across all populations to there is some confidence to work on the excellent ideas? What will be the requirements for holding office in both the Israeli and Palestinian Authority governments?
Well, I didn't understand your last sentence, but as I understand, how do we deal with the distrust between the two peoples? This is mainly the basic question.
Yes,
I think it's very important, and the answer is a combination actually of a political and economic approach. I think it's the best that you will answer after me. You talk about it a lot, where the Palestinians shouldn't be too dependent on the Israeli economy, and this is a very important part. But on the political side, I think this is the mission, and it's a big mission to be this time to go real, to go with the roadmap after a decision from both sides, from all sides, a real decision. I think that what we did in Oslo and in Camp David was not, it was an attempt to build something like an Palestinian entity, which is not really a Palestinian viable state. And it's a very high price for Israel with East Jerusalem, with the question of Plitim, no?
Refugees.
Of this
Refugees,
of course, the question of the future of the refugees and etc. But it has to be built on a real decision, mainly in Israel and by the Israeli government, and this will bring confidence. I remember the talks between Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Abu Mazen then in 2007, 2008. It was a good model of how we should progress with the peace talks. Once they sat together and talked about on the table, opened the map and talked about everything, things were going forward. It was too little, too late. But this is, I think, the approach, much better than the Camp David summit and what happened in the 90s and in the beginning of the millennium by Ehud Barak and Arafat. And we have many lessons that we have to learn from all those experiences. But the trust is basically have to be built by a real progress on the political side. And here I address to Itzhak that will maybe talk about the economic issue, which I think is very important here.
Yes, I totally agree with what you said, Omer, and in fact, on the economic sphere, on the economic sphere, one of the most important things is the help of third parties, because these two parties, Israel and the Palestinians, this is a very it's a very difficult case. This this mistrust and all this all the things that Omer you said. So once you have third parties involved in the process and involved in a way that is most that and involved in a way that these third parties have a real and important role to play in advancing the process and in showing real and tangible developments on the ground. So this is a kind of an help and support that especially in the first years of building the trust, having this third party, strong third parties, regional and international, as parties and as important parties in the process, this would be most helpful, because these third parties will be first they will be very very important in developing the economic aspect of the new arrangement, and second, being strong and having a strong political and economic influence on both parties, on Israel and the Palestinians, it will make it more difficult for Israel or the Palestinians, to do things or to try and do all kinds of provocative things and that may harm the process. That's it, I think.
Okay, if I may jump also to give some other aspects of this to this question, what we proposed here was first that the international community would recognize a Palestinian state and would put the political horizon, political solution, not on the horizon, but very much to put some pressure on both Israelis and the Palestinians. And what we can have also from the international communities are carrots and sticks with very, very strict conditionality. And this conditionality should apply both to Israel and both to the Palestinians. It has been quite weak in the past and not effective, and it could be much more effective from now on. So those are two issues. Obviously, we need a change of leadership in both camps, both in the Palestinian Authority, both in Israel. And once the international community puts this political solution in very sharp, terms, I think Israeli politicians would have to respond to this vision to the international community all around us. And this is why I stress so much the importance of coordination between the United States, the Europeans, and the Arab countries that have relations with Israel or are about to have relations. And so this is, I think, very strong. Civil society has a role to play in having more engagement between Israelis and Palestinians and showing there is a possibility for living together side by side in two states. And obviously the media has a role to play. So this is obviously a very delicate solution or a roadmap to the future in the sense that many could be terrorists, could be Iran, could be other Russia or Chinese or other players that would like to see much more disorder than order in this region, would like to hamper and to sabotage. And we have to create a much stronger, viable solution to the future. It's not an easy path. And it very much depends on the leadership that would be able to change public opinion. And we know that this happened before, and I think it can happen again.
Thank you, Maya. So we have just maybe time for one more question, and then we can wrap it up. Your proposal require not just a new government, but one that is strongly committed to a genuine Palestinian statehood. So far, do you see the Israeli public moving towards or away from this? Question regarding the Israeli, yes, Omer, sorry.
With your permission, I'll try to answer it. We do polls. We and a different body named Accord, we're making polls from the beginning of the war, and it's very, very interesting to see the what I call a schizophrenia in the Israeli public, because first of all, we're in times of war, but on the good side, we see about, and this is from polls that I heard today, the Israeli public, most of the Israeli public, more than 60% is willing to accept what we call a political security settlement, regional settlement. And there is even some drop in the number of those who wants annexation and occupation and all the things that Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and Netanyahu are promising. It dropped from 30% towards more than about 23, 25%. Now, I'm not, it's a very big number. It's terrifying, this big number of the radical right-wing support of the public in Israel. But there is a majority of the Israelis that understand that in order to gain a real deep security, long-term security for Israel, there is a need for a political settlement. Now, the problem is when we're talking about the two-state solution or a viable Palestinian state, it dropped. The numbers are dropping down. And here I'm connecting myself to what Maya said. This is a question for a leadership in Israel. You know, it's not a matter of what phrases you use, but it's a matter of how you don't do what the public wants, but you do what the public needs. This is a real leadership, and this this is a very tricky part that will have to be dealt with in the new Israeli government. It's very delicate, but it can be done.
Right. All right. So I guess right now we really need to finish here. And sorry for all those who ask questions. Of course, I recommend you to send the questions to me or to send them to one of the speakers, of course. So I would like to thank our speakers today for the interesting presentations and the arguments and points throughout the session. And of course, to you, dear guests, really thank you for dedicating your time for this important briefing. So be sure to follow us on social media channels and newsletters we publish now every week. We're going to publish different analyses, op-eds, the summaries of the task force discussions, which are super crucial. So until the next briefing, so I guess it would take time or place at the beginning of next year. So I would like to wish you happy holidays and happy Hanukkah. Thank you for your dedicated support of us throughout the year. Next year brings new opportunities and new challenges for Israel, and with your continuing support, we believe we can achieve new goals and for promoting stability and peace in the region. And thank you again for coming, and wish you a good night here in Israel. May all the Israeli hostages will be set free, and may we start to establish a political horizon for the day after. So thank you very much.